Hello, Bridge Command community. Welcome back to part two of Lieutenant Commander Edmund Ward's Bridge Command patch tier list. If you didn't catch part one, then there should be a link in the video description. But today we're reviewing 10 brand new patches, some of which I overlooked in my first tier list, and but most of which are brand new patches. So without further ado, I'd like to start by making one small amend to the previous tier listing, and I'm probably not going to make friends with this one, but you know what? It's not RuPaul's best friend tier list. So the Takanami Turtles patch violates the 3-inch patch rule. I did not know this at the time, but it is an oversized patch. So I'm afraid that causes the Takanami Turtles to drop to the top of B tier. Moving on to our first new patch today. This is new to this list, but not new by any means. It is the Commonwealth Stellar Navy patch. Now, this is a relic from a bygone era. It's the patch of the Commonwealth Stellar Navy, which was essentially the primary precursor to the United Confederation Navy. The Warspite is a ex-CSN ship converted for use by the UCN. And you will see this patch adorning the arms of Warspite officers who served in the Commonwealth Stellar Navy before it became the UCN. And indeed, you will also find it occasionally on the arms of some London base officers who attended the original 2019 run of Bridge Command, which was set in that era. Now, as for the patch itself, this is presumably a commemorative Commonwealth Stellar Navy patch on account of it contains the date 2145, which is the date that the Commonwealth Stellar Navy was absorbed into the United Confederation of Terran and Circumsolar Nations. So presumably this is not a patch that would have actually been worn by CSN officers during the period of that Navy's existence, but it's a commemorative patch. As for the design itself, look, it's functional. It consists of the CSN logo, which is, got this sort of rays coming out of a globe, making a C. I'm not sure if the globe is supposed to represent Earth or perhaps Gliese 667cc, the super Earth that was supposed to be the new home for humanity and the target of the Exodus fleets. Somebody with more historical knowledge would have to weigh in on that. Design-wise, I think I'd probably, give this patch a clearer border, like we see from some of the campaign patches, and I'd probably pull this text in a little more away from the edge of the patch. It's a nice enough patch, and it's a great bit of world building. But it must be said that it is a patch from yesteryear, and the industry, the art of patch design has come along leaps and bounds in the nearly 40 years since it was created. And so, for that reason, I am going to pop this alongside, just above the generalist patch in B tier. Moving on, let's take a look at the medical patch, another patch that you will primarily see on warspite officers, most specifically on Commander Dr. Kennedy Green and Lieutenant Commander Dr. Nightingale. Interestingly, this patch is not Bridge Command original. It's essentially a paramedics patch, and you can, in fact, go ahead and order one of these online from a variety of different patch printers without having to commission it explicitly. What makes it unique with regard to the standard 3-inch diameter patch is that it does meet the 3-inch patch dimensions, but it contains these rather snazzy cutouts to form the cross, and that really kind of makes it stand out. I think, look, it's elegant, minimalist. It clearly conveys its meaning through the medical serpent symbol here. And I'm a sucker for patches that communicate some specific unique team or function within the ship in an understated way, and this one definitely achieves that. So, I think I'm quite happy to just pop this into the A tier. I think if this had been designed by a member of the community, uh, then I'd probably be calling it an S tier. But since it's just an over-the-counter medical patch, let's not sing its praises too highly. But I think it's nice that we have a specific patch for medical staff, and I think this does its job and feels in keeping with the world. So let's give credit where credit is due. Our next patch today, my apologies for the fairly low quality picture of this patch. This patch can only be found, as far as I'm aware, on the arm of one member of the Warspite crew, our very own Callie Kihu, as a memento of their service on the Elsterbrook comms station located in historic Shackleton Crater on Luna. Now, I'm a big fan of the wider world building that this patch does for us by sort of referencing places and stations, facilities that we don't sort of see in game, and I really appreciate Callie, the original Bridge Command lore fiend, for bringing their own sense of world building and personal character history to their uniform. It's design-wise, it's pretty neat, right? We've got a little bit of texture on the moon craters here. The radio tower is succeeding in fairly clearly communicating that it is a comms station. But that is about it. No shade to the designer, but this is not a superb execution. It's primarily, the text is very thin and threadbare, very hard to read. Not just because of the quality of the photo. I something's going over my head about the birdie here. So maybe I could be persuaded on that, but it's not working for me off the bat. And it is a bit of a rougher implementation, seeing as nobody other than Lieutenant Kihu is likely to ever be wearing this patch. I feel, not too guilty about putting this in its place in C tier. Moving onwards, we have trans rights or bytes. This is a patch by Lieutenant Matt, and a start on design here. Like, as a patch design, this is adorable, Um, it's playful, and the embroidery, like the execution, is incredibly high standard, right? Like this is the, we can see the teeth here. Um, the trans rights flag in the background is providing, a pleasing overall color and impression, making this, one of the more colorful flags, but in a fairly understated way. It's not being garish. Um, Trans rights for all bytes is clearly clear text, and it's all just quite neatly put together. Um, I don't really have any design complaints about the patch per se. And for the avoidance of doubt, I wholeheartedly support the sentiment. So please, issue a press release to tumblr.com. Lieutenant Commander Ward says trans rights. However, look, I have to be a bit harsh. It is not a bridge command patch. It predates bridge command. It was not made for bridge command, and so judging it on a tier list about quality of patches for bridge command, it's gonna limit its ability to raise up to the upper echelons of the tier list, despite it being a delightful design in and of itself. If we could do a tweaked version of it with some nod to the universe, then this could shoot right up to A or even S tier, I would say. Um, and so for those reasons, for now, trans rights or bytes is going into B tier. But I do appreciate that's a little bit harsh. I will say this one other potentially controversial thing, right, which is that whilst trans rights is a very vital and important issue to represent in Year of Our Lord 2025, one thing that we can say with confidence about society in 2181 is that the UCN is highly trans inclusionary, welcoming of all different forms of gender expression. Um, and the way that Bridge Command sort of asserts its politics on this matter is completely crystal clear without without being explicit commentary. What I mean by that, and what I think I really like about that, is it's one of the ways that the Bridge Command universe weaves a really positive Trek-like sort of social progress into its fabric. You're sort of uncommented upon, but the fact that almost all of the Warspite crew introduce themselves with pronouns, that we do have core characters who are non-binary or otherwise genderqueer is and that passes without comment, without prejudice, is really positive and goes a long way to creating a really positive and inclusionary environment. Why do I bring all this up? Well, one, it's an opportunity for me to sing the praises of Bridge Command in that sense. Um, but it also, in terms of the need for a trans rights or bytes patch, perhaps that is not so needed in 2181. Although I completely, as I say, respect the sentiment. Okay, moving on. We now have a trio of patches, all designed by Lieutenant Alex England. This first one is probably my favorite of the bunch. And I believe also Lieutenant Matt, who worked on Trans Rights or Bytes, also provided some assistance on the design of this. But I believe it's primarily Lieutenant England's idea. And it's the Warspite Task Group Society of Drama. produced, I think, in response to Operation Equinox and Billy Wallace's repeated stalled attempts at trying to get some sort of play on the Warspite after the failed attempts of Midsummer Night's Dream and prior to that Spamlet. Those performances, do not always go smoothly. But uh, it's nice to have this aspect of Warspite culture represented in patch form. And, I know that Billy Wallace wears it with pride, as do some of the folks who were involved in the completion of A Midsummer Night's Dream at Equinox. What I really like about this patch is that at first glance, it reads like a Warspite patch. It looks kind of at a glance like it's simply the insignia for Warspite. And that's kind of cool. I'm also rather fond of these nifty little side cutouts to make room for the gun turret and gun barrel of the Warspite logo. So I think that's pretty nifty. It kind of gives this sort of overall a little bit more shape, unique shape to the patch than we see from most other patches. So there's a lot to be said there. Um, let's take a look at the gun barrel, right? The gun barrel is actually a scroll, right? Um, sort of representing some parchment on which a play's script may be written, and I believe that the turret itself here is supposed to be kind of constructed out of paper, like pages from a script. Unfortunately, this is a little bit too subtle for my money. Um, I I like that it reads just an official Warspite patch at a glance, but the trouble is, on a second glance, I'm still not quite sure what it's conveying without referring to the Tech Society of Drama. Again, I think this would be probably helped significantly if the embroidery work was a little stronger. This here is supposed to be a sort of theatrical mask, but I'm afraid it gets lost as a splodge on the actual implementation. So, I think that this is very close to being an A tier patch. Um, I would potentially would bring this scroll so that it is a little bit more scrolled out, so and perhaps with some squiggles of text on it. If we could somehow enlarge the mask, or perhaps have the mask appear in the background so it can be larger and clearer contrasted, then we may do a lot to raise the communicative clarity of this patch. I wouldn't say no to a departure from the grey on the border, although I do like the structure of the border and the way it works. This is a really close to being a superb patch, but it is unfortunately just let down a bit by the execution on the embroidery side. And I think taking a second pass at this with some of the embroidery shortcomings in mind, uh, combined with perhaps commissioning it from a different embroidery service or embroiderer, you could probably push this up to A tier, but I'm afraid it is only B tier as it stands. We'll pop it just after trans rights or bytes. The next one is the Sect of More. This one is also by Lieutenant Alex England. And look, it is a clean and attractive design. The stars look great. And I like the border. And I like the Latin text, which I believe translates as dangerously close. Um, the stars, I am told, these are some, it has to be said, these are some of the nicest stars we've seen on a patch. Um, but, they are supposed to represent the inversion of a fleet admiral. Because the goal of the sect of Moore is to work in the background behind the scenes to get Lieutenant Freddie Moore promoted all the way up to Fleet Admiral. That is obviously a worthy goal that I support. But you know, well, maybe I'm being too critical by saying this is too subtle. I think it is very subtle. It's not at all clear to a layperson that this is a Sect of Moore patch. To me, it's not clear that the stars represent Fleet Admiral. I did have to actively ask Lieutenant England what the stars represented. I think in part because the UCN doesn't really use stars, I think, for Fleet Admirals. It still just uses extra thick stripes. So I'm not sure if I fully get that. It doesn't come out. But in fairness, you might say an underground sect working behind the scenes to get someone promoted by any means necessary maybe wants to fly under the radar a bit and be a bit subtle. Um, but So there's a lot to like about this patch. It's sort of fairly minimalist and simple, but the star elements are really nice. But I think that the idea just could be stronger. Um, the idea of a cult surrounding Freddie Moore is really promising, and I expected a little more from the patch. Um, so I'm sorry, Lieutenant England, but this one is also going into B tier, probably after the Gobies. Um, and My apologies. I'm not going to say much nicer things about the third and final Lieutenant Alex England patch, which is Air Unlocked. Now, this more than any of the others is a comedy patch. I think it's strictly a comedic patch, although I do like to imagine that this is perhaps worn by an airlock maintenance crew to celebrate the critical importance of their role in as a cautionary tale about the most important component of the ship, the airlocks. And it is on its face fairly funny. Both doors of the airlock are unlocked, and the air is whooshing out with this poor hapless stick figure. It is an amusing image, and I can just about forgive the fact that it's not a 3-inch diameter circle, because of course it is trying to evoke um, a warning sign. Um, so I appreciate the sense of humour, and it does fairly effectively convey its meaning in what is amounts to about 15 lines, in two colours, plus the text "Air Unlocked." Um, it's it's the spacing of the text, air unlocked. I don't love. I think that could have done with another pass. Um, But all in all, this is actually quite effective, and proves that you don't need to be super fancy to sort of make me smile. It is a perfectly fine and fun patch to throw on an empty arm, um, but it's probably, I'm afraid, also only a B tier. It's not the most attractive thing in the world. Um, uh, it's just a gag. So before we move on, I do just want to say again an apology to Lieutenant and a shout out to Lieutenant England. Thank you for giving me 3 whole patches of your design to review on this tier list. Um, I am sorry they all only made it to B tier, but please don't be disheartened by the positions of your patches. I know that you have an S tier patch in you, and I can't wait to see it. Moving on, we are going to look at For Those Who've Gone Beyond. This is a memorial patch designed by Lieutenant Laura Magnet Dale. But I must declare bias. I did consult on the design for this patch. The idea behind the patch is that it is a memorial patch inspired by, obviously, the tragic death of Zizix Furlong, but it's not specific to commemorate Zizix. It is a patch worn by UCN officers to commemorate anyone who has died in the course of their service to the UCN. And so therefore it has a bit more general use, God forbid, should we lose any other personnel. Let's talk a little bit about what the patch is doing. We have sort of a planet and then this sort of whoosh of sort of something leaving orbit, going beyond orbit of that planet. The rocket and the star are taken from the core UCN insignia. So that's the sort of nod to existing iconography. And the font, as it happens, is in fact the Gobi's font, but that is for no particular reason other than it looks kind of sci-fi-y, and it's all black because it is, of course, a funereal patch. Now, listen, as I say, I did get involved in the design of this, and so you can take what I say here with a pinch of salt, but this is a design that I am very fond of. I like, I really like this swoosh of the rocket leaving orbit and going beyond, going into the unknown. I like the sort of jaunty angle of the text to make space for the design. I like that it's fairly minimalist. I think that's fitting for a funereal patch. I think it's come out really well, and I think it has a really solid place in the universe. That well, I certainly hope we don't lose anyone else, but it's risk is our business in the UCN, and we may see others die in service. And so I'm kind of glad that we now have a cultural patch for people to rely on, and now if you see someone wearing it, you kind of know what they are. Being respectful of the memory of a lost colleague or a lost friend. So for my money, although I do appreciate I am biased, this is an A tier patch. We'll pop it in the middle of A tier. All credit to Lieutenant Laura Magnet Dale for coming up with the core concept of doing a memorial patch for those who've gone beyond, which for those who've gone beyond, by the way, is a reference to the For Those Who've Gone Beyond dirge that was sung at Zizix Furlong's funeral memorial service. So it engages very deeply with the lore in terms of things that have happened and established ideas about how we honour our dead. And that's a big part of why I've put it in A tier beyond just the design, although I am rather fond of the design as well. Okay, lastly, we've got a couple of campaign patches. This first one is from a campaign crew that I believe was out there when I did the first tier list, but I hadn't heard of them. Were quiet on the Discord, and when I asked, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Oz or Ed Bell who their favorite campaign patch was. They had mentioned Minimum Viable Crew, so I had heard of Minimum Viable Crew, and this is a campaign crew who completed the conspiracy campaign with just 4 people, hence the minimum viable crew. And I really wanted to meet them and have a conversation about how they found the campaign. And then I was on earlier this month. I was on the first ever veteran mission, and I happened to be on with the captain of Minimum Viable Crew, and I spotted the patch, and that's how I knew that he was the captain from that. And I'm a big fan of this patch. One of the huge benefits um, of doing a campaign with only 4 crew members is that your campaign patch can really highlight the individuals who comprise the campaign crew. And my gosh, this one certainly does that. We've got beautiful, adorable little renders of the actual crew members of MVC um, on this patch. And they're saluting, and they're in the UCN jumpsuits, and it's delightful. Um, I think the name Minimum Viable Crew is very fun. I would say that as a product manager, but uh, yeah, this is a lovely patch. And I have said to people I'm not going to make friends with my rankings this time round. I'm going to be incredibly nitpicky here. Um, 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, 6 stars. Why are there 6 stars on this patch? This would be an S tier patch if it had 5 stars, but it's got 6. That just, to me, that just reads as an error. So unless someone from MVC is going to explain to me, no, 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 on our campaign we actually did 6 deployments instead of 5. I'm sorry, MVC. You are you're denied the you're not going in D tier, but you're denied the S ranking, and you're going in A tier. All right, final patch for today. This is a new campaign crew deploying sometime in the new year, but have posted their patches on the Discord. So let's take a look at this crew's patch. It's the Torchbearers. I like the name Torchbearers. I like it a lot more than several of the other campaign crews. I'm not going to name names, but I think Torchbearers as a naming convention for a crew is sort of closer to Gobi, sort of a single word um, name. It sort of refers to the crew as torchbearers. We are the torchbearers, like we are the Gobies, versus something like we are the Raising Havoc crew, shortened to Raisins. I know, but still, I'm a big fan of the name. I'm a big fan of this motto, "Illuminate the Void." That also works really nicely with torchbearers. But let's look at this patch. Right, the patch takes heavy inspiration from the S tier, the only S tier campaign patch, which is Raising Havoc. So that's a very fine patch to take your primary inspiration from, and it works, right? We've got similar color scheme, the gold on going to blue, going to the white text. And then we've got a star field. We've copied the general principle of 5 stars, forming the star field. Note that it's 5 stars, not 6. And then we've got this rather nifty sort of abstract, sort of Olympic torch style um, sconce. Is that what you'd call it? And it looks really good. Sort of abstract, but then the center here looks like it evokes like an engine, a rocket engine nozzle as well. Um, so I think that's very cool. Um, and it's come out really well. The details are lovely. The flame looks really lovely, and it's just really competently done. Um, it owes a lot to the Raising Havoc patch. It doesn't have the glory of like an actual depiction of UCN ship, but it goes a little bit more abstract than that. But I'm a big fan of this patch. There's no doubt this patch belongs firmly in A tier. I'm going to put it at the top of A tier actually. Um, and yeah, well done, Torchbearers. I look forward to hearing about your adventures. So there we are. Slightly more critical I this time round. Nothing new for the S tier, but then again, nothing new for the D tier. Lots of really solid entries in B tier this time round, and a few well deserved A tiers. Please do keep designing patches. Please keep expanding the universe of Bridge Command. And please do let me know how angry you are with this tier list when you next see me in the mess.